Hello students, welcome to UGC lecture series in educational psychology. And today we'll be talking on genetics and environmental influences on intelligence. As is known to you that I did talk about intelligence concept earlier. In that lecture we had a talk on psychometric theories of intelligence and also cognitive understanding of intellectual properties. And today, as I said, I would be concentrating on very important major influences on intelligence as a capability. One is the role of inheritance, or heredity, or genetics, and the other one, the environment. Interestingly, it has always been a very interesting question. Even today, people ask this question with showing an amount of interest that is really very great. That is intelligence inherited? People sometimes believe that there are some people whom they take as genius. They say, no, we have seen that his father, his other relatives happen to belong to a particular type of breed, and all of them are very intelligent. Therefore, this kind of person is also very intelligent. Means actually concentrating upon the heredity or the hereditary characters which influence one's intelligence. We shall examine very shortly how far this kind of thesis or theory is true. But again, interestingly, even in scientific understanding of intelligence, we did start with this kind of thing. Like Francis Galton believed, and I quote him, he said that intelligence travels through blood. And he had actually collected information or data on 200 scientists in his contemporary era in early 60s. That those 200 scientists were somehow related. There was a blood relationship found between these scientists. He himself was cousin of a very great luminary, distinguished scientist known as Charles Darwin. Actually, he got this instinct or inspiration from Charles Darwin to understand intelligence. He was actually questioning himself, what is it that this Charles Darwin has that makes him such a great thing? Who gave this theory of evolution? So basis for the kind of question that I had raised in the first instance was whether intelligence is inherited. Yes, as last time we did talk about some potentialities which are given. And unless you have the structural composition of certain traits, perhaps it would not be possible for us to understand that how it develops then into a kind of action or behavior that finally would qualify our individual lives. So we would say, not me alone, but you'll find lots of scientists talking. Even there was a research conducted by, continuous research for years together, decades together, by Sir Cyril Bert, who would prove to the world that those, so far as racial factors are concerned, so far as the races are concerned, he expressed and he demonstrated and even proven that these people belonging to white race are more intelligent than to those people who are having some other racial background. Perhaps now in late 70s, right from 1975 onwards, his theories, it was then shown to the world that he was actually exaggerating his results. It was not true that way. Even the experiments and researches conducted now, we don't find that there is a kind of racial background, but that is not that significant that you can say that people who do not belong to a particular hereditary group would fail to do certain abilities or do some tasks or perform some jobs. So heredity would definitely work to some extent influencing our intellectual capabilities. A strange experiment that was done once in a psychological understanding of intelligence was that those people who are normally twins and generally identical twins, these identical twins, it is believed that they must have the entire biological structure and their psychology must grow in similar direction or similar ways. It was found that when these twins were separated and taken to different types of environments, it was found that yes, if we take one out of that pair to a kind of say environment like USA or Russia or England or any other country, it was found that later when these people were brought back, an intelligence test proved that there was a kind of difference of 5 points, which is definitely significant, but not that significant that you could say that exactly it is environment that is going to influence the people. So interaction, interplay of environment and hereditary factors is important. It's not only heredity. You can't say that I belong to a particular kind of breed or hereditary background, therefore I am very intelligent. But what is most important is these two factors, that is H, heredity, and E, environment, they interact. Both these factors interact, and then the production or the product is intelligence. But mind, there is one more factor. That's a very important factor, and that is a factor T, that is time. Because if you talk of environment, that environment is helpful for development of intellectual growth, then you take T also. T means a time. At what time, what types of these environmental influences are found on the child. So like for instance, if environment at a particular age, and age happens to be say very small age, that is between +3 onwards, if this is the age, at this moment, if you take in a very narrow limited sense, the meaning of environment would definitely be one, his nourishment, the things that he takes to develop his body, that's very important, and the care that he is getting, the psychological care, affection, love, regard, whatever. All these things put together at a particular time are meaningful. But if you find that nourishment which is needed at say +3 stage is not available to the child, then some of his physiological properties would not grow in the manner in which expectations are there. And if that very nourishment is given to the child at an age when not much of that nourishment would have any kind of influence upon the child's growth, that is useless. So what is very important is that once we talk of heredity on one hand, that is soundness, structural or genetic mechanism of the individual, on the other hand we are talking of the environment, but from environment what are the influences which positively are related with the intellectual development, and what are the influences, experiences which would retard the child intellectually. So we have to take care, and we have found that in earlier ages some kinds of diseases which take a heavy toll of children because of absence of some environmental factors in terms of basic nourishments, feeding. Naturally their IQs are later found to be very poor. Number of research studies have shown that the people whose very growing years, very important years so far as the capabilities are concerned, were poor environmentally, their IQs were found to be very poor. So environment and heredity plus time, that is these three things are to be found in multiplicative way, so that we find that the product is an expected resultant, and that expected resultant is, for the time of for the sake of this discussion, an intelligence. Now again, talking of environment as such, because if I don't talk of environment at, say, some length, perhaps that would not be giving justice to the subject as such. Environment means then the influence, the greatest influence would come from education itself. You see, there would have been, I don't expect that one's intelligence is being influenced, impacted by kind of environment. Perhaps we would say that there is no need of any kind of education or training or advice or counseling. So once we talk of these things, these strategies, actually the mind looks at certain expectations, and the expectation is, if a person is put under some kind of educational strategy, there must be a change. And the change must be in not only in the way in which he acts later, but the change must be seen even in his attitude toward things. As you get positively an attitude toward world as such, your emotional intelligence, about which I did talk in my last lecture, goes high. And if it goes high, you become a very sound person, working in a manner in which you don't find overloaded with anxiety as such. So therefore, education is most important influence from environmental side. After nourishment, of course, nourishment in the beginning, then the proper amount or proper training through education. So if the education is arranged age-wise, grade-wise, we'll find then the intellectual property matures, and matures through certain amount of training and education which comes in the way, and finally the people happens to be, or the person happens to be, very excellent in terms of his performances. Now you can, at this moment, you can put a question across, that even after, say, class 12 or in the first year degree course in the universities, we find that there are some students who are not as fast, who are not even just average, who are just below average. And so type of the environment, the type of education, type of nourishment, all are sound, but then what happens? And you may then finish with the conclusion, sir, the intelligence to me seems to be completely inherited. This is God-given ability, therefore given more in a person, given less in a person, given equivalent to 0 in another person. I would say no. I would say no. The person who in class 12, as you say, is not exercising the amount of intelligence which should have been there expectedly, is not there, not because educational influence is absent, but because the influence of education has not been manipulated, has not been put into the form and the structure in the way in which it was expected. You see, you can formally lead people through educationally. Formal education that way makes no influence. But if you see a child growing through educational mechanism, he himself becomes a participating learner in education. He not only knows what is knowledge, but he creates knowledge for himself. Then you can say the influence of education. Reading a book does not mean I am influenced by the book as such. Growing with book is the influence. And third way that is to be taken from environment as such is the total experience. Not experience as education, experience what I eat, experience what I experience around. That's I belong to a society. I'm a functional individual in the society. Society has its traditions, society has its norms, society has its culture. Society is a number of things you see put together. So my socialization goes through particular types of experiences I get from the society. And if I belong to a very valued society as such, you will see the impact. Therefore, weighing yourself against possession of intelligence as such is not a mechanical performance. That way you will see even dogs performing better. Sometimes you will say dog is performing intelligently within inverted commas when he goes through the fire ring. See what type of confidence the dog has built, how he has learned as such. So I am talking about cultural influence, I am talking about social influence, I am talking about norms and values which crystallize your intellectual behavior as such, so that it is saved from becoming mechanical. So intelligence is not always a demonstrative capability of certain strategic points to surprise people and give them shocks. Intelligence is not totally an inherited trait. It is a quality of behavior, of course, which is the product of multiplicative, interactive function of three major things. 1, heredity. 2, environment. And 3, time. All these things put together put you on an intellectual tract. Or for that, you have to look into the influences from environment again, the nourishment strategies from the very beginning, to the socio-cultural background of people. See, and I remind you, in my earlier talk, I did talk of cognitive approaches to the intelligence concept as such. And once we talk of cognitive approaches, this environmental influence is a tremendous factor that is to be taken care. And that is how a person is not only utilizing a strategy or a mechanism, but he is doing it built upon a particular awareness strategy. He is aware of what he is doing. And what he is doing is actually representing his environmental influences, influence of where he belongs, what he has learned, and what he does, and what are the expectations of his or the learning outcomes. I did talk about environment in such a way that you may conclude quite contrary to those who would place much premium on hereditary factors. So in order to say that no, that is not the case, I would not say, as people would say, that intelligence is only what is inherited or it is a hereditary property, and then on the other pole people would say no, it is an environmental property alone. I would like to tell you that heredity is the factor which sets limits or which shows the extent to which environment and time can influence intelligence. This is to be understood properly, that you can't go beyond that limit which has been set already by hereditary factors. Environment has a say in development of intelligence or influencing intelligence, and time also has the same kind of claim. But their claims, their influences are to be ordained by the limit set by the heredity. So that is to be taken properly. That is, you cannot ignore and avoid or give less importance to hereditary factors. As I said earlier, that some of the twins, identical twins, their IQs were found, significantly similar. There was only a difference made by some kind of environment. You will find the correlation table between the people who are reared apart, or the people who are reared together, are people reared in one kind of environment, and the people reared in different kinds of environments. By people, I mean those people with a kind of intelligence which is shared because of their being twins. Or even those people who are relatives, but then they have some kind of genetic background which gives them some similarity, that too is seen. So the point that I am making is that so long as further research and new researches would come to show you that there are only some cerebral structures responsible for taking care of intelligence of a person. Till that date, what is known to us through the kind of research investigations conducted is that heredity, genetic factors, then environment factors, suitable, sometimes selected, sometimes experienced factors, and also time, all these factors put together help to understand the growth and development of intelligences, not only as a concept but as a way of behaving. Okay, basically, as I repeatedly said, that it is a quality of behavior. It adds to the increased properties of a person's action and its quality while he is working or he is performing or he is doing whatever he is doing. There his behavior would be qualified by his intelligence, and intelligence to be based both on heredity and environment, and also shown a fair play in terms of time. Thank you very much.